The calm of that crisp morning shattered like glass when sirens began echoing across Silver Pine Lake. I froze on my freshly built dock, clutching a box marked Kitchen Fragile as two police cruisers roared down the dirt road. Dust clouds billowed behind them as they skidded to a stop beside my moving truck. Before I could process what was happening, a woman in a blindingly pink visor came marching toward the officers, waving her clipboard like a general leading troops into battle. Behind her trailed a curious crowd of neighbors, some still in pajamas and robes, all eager to witness whatever drama she had just unleashed. "That's him," she screeched, stabbing a manicured finger in my direction like it could shoot lasers. "He's trespassing on private property. Arrest him immediately. He's been here since 6 this morning, disturbing our peace." The older officer, his hair streaked with gray, blinked in mild confusion. His partner, much younger, was clearly fighting back a laugh. "Ma'am," the older cop asked, keeping his tone measured, "can you explain what exactly is going on?" The woman, who I'd soon come to know as Carol Peaton, self-proclaimed ruler of the Lakeshore Estates HOA, swelled with righteous indignation. Her pink tracksuit stretched at the seams as she puffed herself up, planting both hands on her hips. "This man is illegally occupying this cabin. He has no permits, no authorization from the board, and he's already in violation of 17 HOA bylaws." She snapped her clipboard open dramatically, like she was presenting evidence in a high-stakes trial. I set my box down slowly and pulled out my phone. "Officer, my name's Drew Sullivan. I own this property. Closed on it last week." I held up the digital deed for him to see. "It used to belong to my Uncle Frank. He left it to me." Carol's face flushed a dangerous shade of purple. "That's impossible," she barked. "Every property on this lake falls under our HOA. I oversee all new residents. This man never applied." The officer scanned my documents carefully as Carol launched into another tirade. After a long moment, he turned to her with the patience of a man who had probably dealt with 1,000 Carol before. "Ma'am, this gentleman owns the property. Unless you have evidence of a crime, there's nothing we can do." "But he hasn't paid HOA dues," she shrilled. "He skipped the mandatory orientation. And his truck is blocking the scenic view." Her voice grew more shrill with each complaint. The younger officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, is his property actually part of your HOA?" "Of course it is," she snapped without hesitation. "Everything within a mile of Lakeshore Estates belongs to us." I couldn't help but correct her. "Actually, no. This cabin was built 40 years before your neighborhood even existed. My uncle never joined your HOA. Carol's eyes narrowed into slits behind rhinestone-studded sunglasses. "We'll see about that, Mr. Sullivan. Nobody makes a fool of Carol Peaton. Nobody." She spun on her heel and stormed off, her hot pink sneakers squeaking on the gravel. A few neighbors lingered awkwardly. One old man gave me a sympathetic nod. A younger couple quickly looked away. I could feel the invisible battle lines forming right then and there. The officers left a few minutes later, giving me polite nods and what sounded suspiciously like a whispered good luck. Carol, however, didn't go anywhere. She parked herself at the edge of my property with a folding chair, a little table, and a thermos that reeked of vanilla latte. In her lap sat a telephoto lens camera that belonged more in a wildlife documentary than a lakeside neighborhood. She started snapping pictures of everything: my truck, my boxes, even the sandwich I'd left on the porch railing. "That's improperly stored food," she announced. "Health code violation. Potential bear hazard." I glanced from her to my turkey sandwich. "Carol, it's a sandwich," she sniffed. "That's President Peaton to you." Scribbling furiously on her clipboard, she added, "And that's another violation. Failure to address HOA leadership with proper titles. $50 fine." Over the next 3 days, Carol became a one-woman wrecking crew of my sanity. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., she showed up with a new list of infractions. My dock was 2 inches too long. My trash cans were the wrong shade of gray. The movers had left tire marks on the gravel road. "These are serious violations," she declared on day 3, shoving a stack of papers at me. $900 for unauthorized dock usage, $600 for non-compliant refuse containers, $200 for damage to the community road. I looked at her stack of legal documents. written in Comic Sans, decorated with clip art. "Carol, I've told you. I'm not part of your HOA. These fines mean nothing." Her laugh was rusty, sharp. "Oh, you sweet summer child. Lakeshore Estates governs the entire waterfront. Your uncle may have played rebel, but I've been president for 6 years. Things have changed." She wasn't wrong. Things had changed. Just not how she imagined. That evening, I started digging. The county clerk's office had digital records stretching back decades. And what I found nearly made me laugh out loud. Not only was my property never under HOA jurisdiction, but their own little kingdom was built on shaky ground. Their private beach sat on state-protected shoreline. Their boat launch? Built illegally on wetlands. Their scenic trail? It crossed property they didn't even own. And then came the smoking gun. Email chains between Carol and the former board, laying out their plan to expand HOA territory by intimidating non-members into voluntary compliance. By sunrise, I had my ammunition. The State Environmental Protection Agency was eager to talk about wetlands violations. The county commissioner wanted to know more about illegal construction. The war Carol started was about to take a very different turn. The calls I'd made were already stirring up waves. Within days, the Department of Natural Resources wanted answers about restricted lake access. And while state agencies quietly moved in the background, Carol went into overdrive. One afternoon, I came home from a grocery run to find my dock wrapped in blinding orange tape, crisscrossed like a crime scene. A laminated notice flapped in the breeze, announcing in bold red letters, "Immediate violation of regulation, 473B unauthorized watercraft mooring." The punchline? I didn't even own a boat. But Carol didn't let little details like reality get in her. Wait, she'd also formed what she proudly called her compliance committee. 3. Women trailed behind her everywhere she went, perfectly synchronized, in matching pink visors and tracksuits. They took shifts standing at my property line, clipboards in hand, documenting every second of my existence like I was the star of a very boring reality show. On Tuesday, they recorded excessive smoke emissions from my burger grill. On Wednesday, when I hammered a loose board, I got slapped with unauthorized construction without permits. But the grand finale came on Thursday. Carol marched up with a decibel meter, pointed it at my dock, and waited as I walked. 82 decibels, she announced triumphantly, as if she'd cracked some secret code. That's above our peaceful enjoyment threshold of 75. I stared at her, blinking. "Carol, that's the same volume as a garbage disposal. Are you really trying to fine me for walking?" She sniffed. "It's not walking. It's aggressive stomping with intent to disturb." She waved the meter dramatically. "And I have 3 witnesses." Her committee nodded like bobbleheads, visors gleaming in the sun. That was the moment my patience snapped like a dry twig. I documented everything. Every photo, every fake citation, every absurd claim. Then I launched my counteroffensive. The first inspector arrived a week later. Carol rushed to intercept him, clipboard clutched to her chest, but her confidence faltered when he introduced himself from the State Environmental Agency. I watched from my porch with a mug of coffee as he measured the HOA's beach area, snapped pictures of their illegal structures, and took soil samples from their boat launch. More officials followed like dominoes. The county surveyor spent 2 days staking property lines. The Public Access Committee investigated blocked entry points to the lake. Each visit chipped away at Carol's smugness. Each day, her visor tilted just a little more crooked. When the HOA finally called an emergency meeting at the Lakeshore Estates clubhouse, I decided to attend as a concerned neighbor. The room buzzed with anxious murmurs as Carol gripped the podium, trying to control the narrative. "This is obviously a targeted harassment campaign by our newest resident," she declared, pointing at me like a villain in a courtroom drama. "He's bitter about our reasonable fees and regulations, so he called in these inspectors to intimidate us." A man in the front row raised his hand. "Carol, is it true the state's fining us $50,000 for the wetlands violations?" Her confident veneer cracked. "That's under negotiation," she stammered. Another woman spoke up. "And what about the cease and desist order for the beach? My kids play there every summer." "Temporary setback," Carol said quickly. "My husband's cousin is a lawyer. We'll appeal." I stood slowly. May I address the board? Carol's glare could have peeled paint. You're not a member. You don't belong here. But before she could shut me down, the treasurer raised his hand. Given that this affects the entire lake community, I think we should hear him out. I walked to the front with a neat folder under my arm. I've brought copies of the original lake surveys, state findings, and the legal boundaries of your HOA, I said, handing out the documents. For years, your association has claimed authority over properties and public land it doesn't own, my cabin included, along with 3 other vintage properties on the North Shore, plus 2 acres of protected state waterfront. The reaction was immediate. The room exploded into chaos. Neighbors shouted over one another. Board members frantically flipped through the documents, their faces draining of color with every page. Carol pounded her gavel so hard the head snapped off, launching into the lemonade table with a splat. "Lies!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "This man's a troublemaker, a rabble-rouser. He forged those papers. He's working with the government. This is a conspiracy." The treasurer held up one of the emails. "Carol, this came from your account. You literally wrote, and I quote, 'Establish dominance over the non-compliant shoreline properties through persistent enforcement action.' That's taken out of context," she sputtered. "The context," another board member added dryly, "is the subject line. It says, 'Operation Total Lake Control.' The meeting unraveled from there." A resident named Janet stood up, waving her own stack of papers. "I've kept every fine Carol's given me. $600 because my kayak was the wrong shade of blue. $400 because my welcome mat was too whimsical. $800 for wind chimes. They're just wind chimes," she added, as laughter and anger rippled through the room. Tom from Unit 12 shared his aggressive garden gnome citation. Sally from the corner lot had been fined for attracting non-approved birds to her feeder. One by one, the residents unleashed years of pent-up frustration. Carol's little empire wasn't just built on harassment. It was rotten through. The court hearings that followed were brutal. The judge didn't mince words. The Lakeshore Estates HOA had violated multiple state regulations. They were ordered to remove all structures from protected land within 60 days and were barred from claiming control over any property beyond their legal deeded lots. The fines totaled $175,000, but the final blow came with the judge's last sentence. Furthermore, due to evidence of intentional misrepresentation and harassment of non-member property owners, Ms. Carol Peaton is hereby barred from holding any HOA leadership role for 10 years. The courtroom filled with a stunned hush. Then came Carol's shriek, a sound so piercing it could have cracked glass. "You can't do this!" she howled. "I built this community. I am the HOA." Security moved forward as she lunged at the bench. Her pink visor flew off mid-scream, her husband scrambling to hold her back. 10 years. 10 years! She screeched as the judge's gavel slammed down. "Ms. Peaton, you're in contempt. Additional $5,000 fine." Carol collapsed into her chair, pale as paper, mouth opening and closing like a stunned fish. Meanwhile, her once loyal neighbors quietly filed out, making sure not to meet her eyes. The Queen of Lakeshore Estates had finally lost her crown.